Hello, and welcome to the Advocating for Your Child with Special Needs portion of the Parent Series. Here, with collaboration between Brighton Center and Any Baby Can. My name is Juan Hernandez, and I am a special education advocate and trainer with Brighton Center, and I'm here with my good friend, Ana.
Hi, I'm Anna Cotton, and I'm from Any Baby Can. I'm the Autism Services Program Director there right now, and before that, I was special education teacher, administrator for over 30 years in public schools. So lots of experience in this area.
Nice. So we got a lot of good insight. All right. So the way we're going to go into this is I'm going to approach it from an advocate and a parent point of view, as a parent of two kids with special needs, and then Anna will give her perspectives as a special educator, among many other things. So I think you guys will get a lot out of this video. So thinking advocacy when it comes to our children with special needs, I think one of the most important things is communication, right? Making sure that we're communicating clear, effectively. A lot of times parents can get overwhelmed with not understanding exactly what's going on in the process. And that can lead to a lot of miscommunications or even almost attacks on the schools when there doesn't need to be, right? Whenever it comes to our children and how they're going to go throughout their educational career, there is a team that's established to help them throughout this process. And the most important members of that team are us, the parents. But with that comes a heavy responsibility of being able to collaborate with the school staff, with the school personnel, whose job it is, whose responsibility it is to educate our children. So, being able to communicate clearly and effectively is that sort of that first milestone that we got to make sure that we really have down. And a couple different ways to do that. One is anytime we're going to communicate with the school, don't do phone calls, don't do, even face-to-face sometimes are not as effective, but try to do emails as much as possible. When you communicate via email, you have a written record of what's being communicated, right? And even after you have a phone call, after you have an ARD meeting or an IEP meeting, follow it up with an email. Hey, this is what I understood by this, and then bullet point down your concerns or what your ideas were, and ask them to confirm whether or not you understood everything correctly, right? You want to make sure that there's no misconceptions on either end, right? And I'll get into this as we talk about being in an ARD meeting, but a lot of times people may perceive things to be something that they're not. I perceive it to be this, you perceive it to be this, and it just really throws off the balance of things because we're both thinking something differently. So when in doubt, when in doubt, ask. Anna?
Absolutely, that's what I was going to say, Juan. I think it's really important that you ask questions. If things aren't clear to you, or you feel you're not quite understanding, or maybe if something just doesn't sit well with you, make sure that you ask questions. It's never a dumb question. It's never, you remember, you're advocating for your kiddo. And even if it's something that can be clarified really quickly, it's still a good question because you don't want to go away from that meeting in that process not knowing what really is going to be happening. So you need to make sure that you're asking questions. And in part of that, it's good to communicate, like Juan said beforehand, even have some emails back and forth or some meetings, really just confirming everything at the ARD. You want to make sure that a lot of the work really should be done ahead of time. You want to make sure that you're communicating with your case manager or teacher, whoever your point of contact is. Make sure that you're doing that beforehand. It's a good idea to have that relationship anyway. And so it would be good to do it beforehand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And because the ARD meeting, because the IEP meetings are such formal meetings, there can be a lot of pressure. As a parent, I remember when I walked into my first one, I was intimidated. There was a lot of people sitting around the table, and it was very uncomfortable. Now there's no way that I'm going to be able to stand up to what they offer. But, really doing the work ahead of time and having that communication and establishing that relationship early on can really alleviate all of that. And all the hard work can be done beforehand. That way, when you come into the ARD meeting, you're really just finalizing everything. A big thing that I read here the other day from Wright's Law was about communicating your concerns and kind of your requests with your child's committee. And one, it's knowing, what do you want, right? Being able to communicate clearly. What do you want? And then looking at the facts, right? Staying away from opinions, because if we ran things off of opinions, our children would get nowhere, right? No one can tell us what our child needs better than our child. Even if they cannot verbalize or vocalize to you, we look at the data, we collect data, we look at how they're performing, and we use those things to sort of steer how we adjust their plans. Whenever we present a request to the art committee, or we're saying, you know, this is something that we're interested in, always then have kind of your, if there's a concern, have a proposed solution to that concern, right? This is what I'm seeing. This is something that I feel that we can try, right? Present it to the committee, and then throw your data out there. Let them see what you're basing your kind of your concerns off of, especially right now during a pandemic when children haven't been in school for the most part since spring break. We have some kiddos that are now back to in person, and as you know, as this video's out there and as people watch this, there'll be more and more. We have the Safe Haven, and you know, a lot of schools are starting soon, so we'll see that more. But parents, we've had them for 6-7 months now, and we're the ones that can see what they can do, what they cannot do, what they need a lot more support with, whether it be behavior, functional skills, or academics, right? So Anna said something very, very good, and I think it really, and it's that doing all the hard work ahead of time, right? It's doing all the work for the art meeting ahead of time. And with that, I go into my next point of parents, we got to do our homework. Have to know what you're talking about, right? If I always tell people, you've got to give the school a reason to take you seriously, and not in a threatening way, but in a collaborative way, right? I've got to know that the person that I'm collaborating with, the person that I'm talking with, the person that I'm, you know, going to be expressing my ideas and concerns with knows what they're doing, right? As parents, we're the subject matter experts on our children. No one knows our children like us. So we bring an important role to that art committee. On that same note, the administrators are held to certain standards when it comes to the law, right? They have responsibilities to look at the side of the student, but they also have the responsibility of looking at the side of their staff and of the district, right? They almost play devil's advocate in a lot of meetings, and parents get upset over that. But it's knowing the roles and responsibilities of everyone in that committee and really taking that perspective, keeping that in mind, and you're not settling, so to speak, but with a little bit of empathy and understanding where everybody's coming from, it can definitely help alleviate, again, a lot of stress. So with that, go ahead, Anna, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and let me just add a little bit that I think it's really important that you brought out about the different roles that people play in the ARD committee, along with the parents' role. It's important that it's a collaborative effort, but you bring different perspectives. That's why you have a group together. So it's important that you understand that and make sure that you know that everyone plays a different role. And that's why that committee is made up of those different people. So it's important that that's that collaborative effort, because you're going to get more done if you're being collaborative versus adversarial with each other. So that's why it's really important. It's okay if you have to bring up difficult situations or difficult things, but I think it's still important that you look at this as a collaborative. That's really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, it's like any successful relationship, you have communication, collaboration, working with each other and making sure that we're keeping, you know, everybody's best interests at heart. And really, as an art committee, as a team, there's one person that we're concerned with. There's one person who should remain the focus. It should maintain a child-centered process. That should be the one person, not, you know, I've been teaching for this long. Well, I've been their parent for this long. My evaluation this, I've been an admin here. It should be about one thing, and that's the child and what they're going through and the services that they need to be successful, because eventually they're going to be out of all of our hands and having to do this on their own as adults. So we want to make sure that we're setting them up now to be as successful as possible. With doing your homework, parents, really, I think it's important that you guys, one, learn the language. Special education has its own language, its own acronyms and its own lingo, and the way that things are worded in the law, and they sound, intimidating here and there. Learning the language can help also, because then there's no misconceptions of what you think is supposed to be provided based off of the way it's worded within the documentation. Go to trainings, watch webinars like this, right? And really network with people that are in similar situations with you, right? We collaborate, Brighton Center and Any Baby Can, and have classes for parents, special education law classes. And it's great because not only are they coming and speaking with us, but they're meeting other families that are just like theirs with a lot of the same questions, or, oh, I've been through that. Here's how we handled it. And that collaboration as well can help, bring your knowledge base up a little bit. Make sure that you establish yourself, again, before you go into the art meeting, have the documentation that is sort of leading up to that meeting. What documentation is that? The most current evaluation, the most current IEP, any work samples that you have, IEP progress reports, all of these things. Put a binder together and make sure you have those things. Not every little thing from the past 10 years, but for the last year or for the last IEP year, have that stuff together. That way you know exactly what we're basing our recommendations from, moving from this to this. We can kind of see how your child has progressed, and we can make those informed decisions or recommendations based off of what the data says that they've done. Like Anna said, this is one thing that I'll always go back to is always preface the meeting with email, right? Do some kind of communication. Make sure that you have your concerns already voiced before you get to an ARD meeting. There's been too many times where parents try to sneak attack the school, and they're like, well, I have this, and this. And school's like, okay, well, we're going to have to get back to you. We don't have answers for all of that right now, right? And parents get upset because like, they should have answers. Okay, well, if you just, sneak that stuff in there, just like us parents don't want for there to be surprises in the IEP or surprises in my child's education on the school, we got to kind of give them that same leeway, right? Communicate what our concerns are. Let them know, yes, there are certain components of the IEP that are going to be discussed, but aside from that, I have these concerns. When writing an email, don't make it 3 pages long. Believe me, that's that's a bad thing to do. I know you're going to have a million things that you might be concerned with, but keep it short, keep it very deliberate, but point your concerns. That way they can have something, just sort of like an outline to go off of when it comes to your concerns, right? Be deliberate, but be very clear and understanding that, like me as a professional, if I see an email that's got 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs, I'm sorry, I'm gonna put you to the side and I'll get back to you later. And a lot of times that can happen with parents as well. And some of our things we feel cannot wait. So try to be as clear, keep it short, sweet, simple, but make it to the point.
So Juan, I want to just reemphasize what you said about not trying to surprise somebody or doing that sneak attack,
Yeah.
Because nobody likes that. And so, like you said, it's really important. And that's another good reason to do your homework ahead of time, and also communication as well. And then just really having that rapport and that relationship with that teacher, because that's really the big work gets done there. And so you want to make sure that you have that. And then if you have that relationship, then hopefully you're able to ask those questions more often and to gain that relationship and build that rapport with them. Sometimes you might need help from somebody else to help you do that, but I think it's still important to do that, even if it's difficult to do. So really important not to surprise each other. That relationship will only get better if you work together.
Yeah. And with having that relationship, like you said, and really asking those questions, and honestly, they should have a good idea. If you guys are collaborating, if you guys are communicating, they should have a good idea of what your concerns are. They should know, and they should have those same concerns. We might approach them differently as educators, parents, advocates, but that's the beauty of the art committee, that everybody brings that different perspective and their why. When they bring that why, then it gives you that opportunity to view it through their lens. And really, that when you can do that and do it successfully, then that just means that the sky's the limit for the kiddo that you guys are convening that art committee for. And so next, in the actual ARD meeting itself, all right, this is where a lot of parents get thrown off. It can be intimidating. Make sure that you guys prepare yourself emotionally, mentally, burn your candles, whatever you got to do to get ready for it, because this meeting's pretty important. And we want to make sure that, one, we don't waste anybody's time, but two, that we come together, and when we leave that meeting, everybody knows what went down. Everybody understands what's expected of them and their roles in educating your child, but also that you feel good and confident that you know what's going on with your kiddo and why, right? You want to make sure, again, that you have your IEP binder, you've attended webinars, you've looked up the laws, you understand, okay, my child has an IEP, not a 504. They used to have a 504. That now that they're in special education, that's no more. Now they have an IEP, right? Knowing the difference between the two. I have a lot of parents that still fumble back and forth between that or RTI. Like, no, we're in special education, IDEA, and going down that route. Make sure you do your homework, right? Collaborate. Get in touch with someone that can support you, right? Brighton Center, Any Baby Can. There's a lot of organizations out there that have these different trainings, just that can give you the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of special education law, knowing how to navigate that, or at least how to get started and how to start establishing yourself.
Juan, I want to again emphasize thinking about what you're going to need during that ARD, because like you said, it can be difficult and emotional, and it could be overwhelming. And so you want to make sure you have your coping mechanisms, your coping skills, strategies for yourself. Do you need to take a break at one point? Do you need to take a deep breath? Do you need to have someone with you that is supportive if you don't have, a partner that's going in with you already? So make sure that you have those strategies with you, just like we would talk to our kids. Make sure that if you're going into a difficult situation, that you have those coping mechanisms, those coping strategies for yourself. It's important to do that. Because it is overwhelming. This is a tough, process sometimes, and hoping with that relationship it gets better and easier, but you're still going to be talking about difficult things, and so you want to make sure that you have those strategies for yourself.
Absolutely, I definitely was not ready for the first ARD meeting that I went. I have 2 kiddos with special needs, so they were actually back to back because they were in the same school, and my wife knew what she was doing. She wanted to hit me hard with it, so I go to more meetings with her, and it really did. Like it took a lot out of me because I have ADHD and I can't sit still for a long time and I'm moving around. But it also sort of lit a fire under me to, be there for my wife and see that it's not just mama's thing to do to go to those school meetings. It's a big responsibility on me as well as a support, as probably her biggest support system. And there are kiddos too, dads. So if there's any dads, uncles, grandfathers watching, I always get on the fellas because we tend to lean back a little bit when we should be up there and really, really being that major support or taking the lead, and taking a lot of that stress off of our spouses.
I also want to add real quick one that when we get emotional, sometimes we get extreme in our thinking and in our expectations.
Absolutely.
So we want to make sure, again, to stay as even as we can, because that hopefully will help us keep a balance in what we think needs to be happening, and we don't get it.
Yeah. Emotion can really throw a lot of things off. Yeah. It can cause people to become defensive to where now my professional hat is off, and now I, squaring up hat is on. And like I said at the very beginning, it's about one person. It's not about, me and my feelings. It's not about this person and their, expertise. It's about one child with special needs that needs services. So whether we agree or not, whether we end up having to table the ARD meeting and come back at a later date, whether we take a break there in the middle and come back in 5 minutes, no matter what, while that IEP is still worked on, that's a kiddo that is needing services. We need to make sure that we have that stuff in check, right? And I'm not saying to completely let go of the emotions, because that emotional aspect is what makes you, driven to set up your child's plan as best as possible. And with that plan, don't be afraid, and Anna said it, is to ask questions. There are no dumb questions, especially in ARD meetings, because there's so much through that process, right? The meetings can go an hour, 2 hours, sometimes even 3 or more, right? Make sure that you understand what's happening and why. Ask, what does that look like? What does that mean? Show me, please, and say, what's that going to look like for me as a parent, especially for those of us who have kiddos that are going to stay virtual. Okay, how do I measure those goals? How do I set up a data collection system? What can I do to make sure that I'm doing my part as a parent and as a teacher right now virtually, until they return to in-person learning. And really ensure that your team, your ARD committee, is keeping that IEP as simple as possible. We want it to be simple. We want it to be clear. We want it to be completely functional. If we put in 1 million different accommodations, 1 million different services, and make it the big, fluffed up IEP, really, the chances of that IEP being successfully implemented go way down. We want to keep only the things that we absolutely need and that work for that child and that IEP. Because if you overdo it, now that's a lot more responsibility on the staff that's already overwhelmed, right? Teachers before COVID-19 already had a huge responsibility, right? And that's just looking at it realistically. I want to make sure that my kid will get service, so I'm going to keep it as simple as possible to ensure that they can report back that it's happening. And you can see it as your child starts beginning to show success. If they're happy, if they don't fight you when you're dropping them off at school or getting on the bus, those are little signs that let you know that things are going good.
And so it's really important, like you were saying, make sure only have in there what you think is absolutely important to have them. And that's why there's that committee to talk about those different perspectives.
Yeah.
Also important to make sure that it's reasonable, that, like you said, that it can be carried out, it can be documented on, that you can get good feedback about it. And if that's part of actually the job of all the people around them, is to make sure that everyone's kept in check, to make sure that we really can do that. That is really a reasonable thing that we can do. And I know as a parent, we have to make sure that we get what we need for our kiddo. Absolutely. But we still are talking about public school education. So we need to make sure that it's reasonable. There are other kids, other stuff. Now, we're not talking about those other kids, and we don't focus on that, but we still have to make sure it's reasonable, that it can be carried out. If we put something in a plan, then it's not carried out, that doesn't do anybody any good. So we want to make sure, again, that it's doable.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And at the end of the meeting, parents, when you get to the end of an ARD meeting, of an IEP meeting, how do you feel? Did you understand everything that was discussed? Did you understand everything that was put in place? Because if you understood it one way, but the teacher understands it one way, the special educator, then the general education teacher understood it a different way, again, we're going to have confusion. So that goes back to the asking questions, like, for an accommodation. Okay, yeah, cool. We're going to give him, give them the opportunity to take breaks very often. Okay, cool. What does that mean? What does that look like? Is that every 5 minutes? Or is that 5 minutes every hour? Is that, 30 seconds every 50? Clearly define what that is. That way, there's no misconceptions on anybody's part. And later on when you ask your kiddo, or when you see the notes or the progress reports, that stuff is happening, and you know exactly what is happening when they say that they are doing them. Don't feel rushed. If you do not feel good about that IEP, don't sign it, right? If they're going to give you 25% APR when you're buying a brand new car, are you going to sign those papers? No, you're not. You're going to sit, you're going to wait, you're going to negotiate, you're going to talk through, whoa, hold up. I don't feel good about this, right? This is even more important than buying a car, buying a house, making any major purchases, is your child's education. And especially this plan that's going to target their areas of need. So if you don't feel good about it, if you are not 100%, you know what, like, I feel pretty good about this, then don't sign, right? Or sign and then don't agree, right? Or just let them know before it even gets to that. Look, I'm not feeling good about it at all. And this is a couple of the reasons why, right? If you feel like this is good right now, but I want to collect data and I want to meet back up with you guys in about 6 weeks and look at that data and look to see if we've kind of taken a step in the wrong direction somewhere. But IEP meetings, ARD meetings can happen as often as we want throughout the year. You don't have to have just ARD meetings. You got parent-teacher conferences, staffings, you got email communication, you got face-to-face interactions. Make sure you take advantage of all those, because without all that, then we're just left in the dark and we don't know what's working for our kid or what's not, right? So make sure that you know exactly what was put in that IEP, what it means, and make sure you feel good about it.
And
right?
like you said, if you need more time to have explanation about it, I know that I've sat with parents before, after the meeting is done, before they decide to sign, just to kind of go through it. And it's not an adversarial thing at all. I just need more information, or I need a little bit more time to process this to make sure I understand what I'm signing. And that's good. I know plenty of educators and special educators and support staff that have done that with parents, and that it's not an unreasonable thing to ask for.
Yeah.
And also just make sure you do go in, like you were saying, looking at different solutions and being flexible with those things. Sometimes somebody will have an idea that you didn't even think would have one. And so you just have to have that open mindset to say, I'm open for solutions. And sometimes you do have solutions, or you have ideas at least, but you might have to maybe come to a compromise with it or tweak it a little bit. That flexibility is a really good thing to have, not at the expense of your child, but just at making sure that we're getting at it at the best way we can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why I love collaborating, because you do get different perspectives, whether it's us as professionals collaborating to give information to parents, or in ARD committees, or whatever it is. The more we can get out of it, the better, right? And that goes with parents learning, that goes with kiddos getting the services that they need, getting that information out there, making sure that everybody's on the same page. And with that, it comes to my one of my last points is establishing trust, making sure that, that there's good faith in between you and the rest of your ARD committee. Y'all are there for one common goal, right? You just make sure that everybody understands where you're coming from, why, and they should, but give them the opportunity to also share that with you, right? And the more you talk, the more you ask questions, the more they see that you're eager to understand, you're eager to learn, and they'll explain things to you. And it'll sort of set the norm for future meetings. Hey, you know what? We're not going to rush through it. Let's take our time. Because I know schools don't purposely rush through meetings. Then parents might feel like they're talking at them and not to them, but that's because they do several ARD meetings a day, several a week, a month, a year, and it's just something that's just repetition. They can go through it, and boom, boom, boom. They understand we're good. But as parents, we need them to, take a step back, slow down for us, and that's fine, and just establish those new norms for your meetings. And with that, it's ensuring that you, like Anna said, set up a support system. Mm-hmm. Have someone there you can trust, and that's in the meeting, before the meeting, after the meeting, right? You have Any Baby Can, you have Brighton Center, you got so many organizations out there that are willing to sit with you and really discuss your IEP, discuss evaluations. If I don't have any plan for my kid, or at least that I know of, we can get you started in the right direction of knowing, okay, this is where I start and this is where I should be, right? And then, kind of guiding you along the way. But Anna, do you have anything before we close out?
I think the only thing I would continue to add with what you were saying is that that trust is really important. Let's say an annual ARD, you can still call back another meeting if something is not quite going the right way after a few weeks, and make sure that you do that and don't let it wait and it gets worse. Make sure that you address it when you need to. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So guys, thank you very much for tuning in. If there's anything you need, please reach out to either Brighton Center or Any Baby Can. We'll put up a graphic here at the end. So let's be in touch. Thank you very much.